The number one reason that a whitetail property fails is the food plot, is a food plot in general. Now, we could be talking about one food plot, we could be talking about many food plots. We are not talking about what grows in the food plot, what doesn't grow in a food plot, thatch, if you're using a no-till system, if you're planting brassicas, if you're planting rye. That's not what this is about. The moral of this video is to prove, which the last video that I posted proves this, proves that the planting a food plot for the whitetail deer on your property can be the biggest destruction of that property. So sadly, most of the time I find that it doesn't take years for that to surface. That happens the first year, and we're going to talk about why that is. So to finish, posted the video the other day about the routine. The comments start coming in about the food plots. Now that video was loaded with other things as far as placement, having all your amenities, making sure that your property is not too dense, making sure the deer can experience the farm, having all of that stuff set in place, your stand assemblage, all the licking branches, water holes, everything at your stand assemblage around the property, hopefully following my lead and making that 360-degree movement per your contour, per your edge on your property. And everything that has came in, except for one gentleman, every comment that has stemmed from that has been about a food plot. My property failed last year because my food plots, I didn't have summer food. My property failed last year because my brassicas failed and I had planted rye. My property failed because of this, my property failed because of that, my food plot, my food plot, my food plot. Only one gentleman from Wisconsin, and you'll know who you are if you're tuning into this, contacted me and talked about the truth behind having the power of having your property connected 360 degrees around, having all the amenities in separate locations working, not having a property too dense, having a little bit of having the right density and the correct openness throughout the property, so the whitetail buck can experience that, so he comes back in the fall and experiences it. All the other comments, probably about 30 other comments and emails and messages and everything else tied to that, were all related to food plot. That proves the topic of today. The number one reason that a whitetail property fails is because of the food plot. Guys, this time of the year, and we've got a video here coming after this one that kind of ties in. We're going to go into more detail about this, but this time of the year, we really need to start focusing on what else our property has to offer going into fall, or what our property doesn't have to offer because of things that we either didn't get done, that we didn't know about, that we haven't created, other than the food plot. But this time of the year, there's so much focus, going back a week or two, or depending on where you're at in the country, from Kentucky here where I'm at south, maybe you're yet planning that into the middle of September. Fall food plots is such a huge focus that what happens is everyone banks their success, everyone builds their property off the food plot. So what happens is we're just planting food plots in God-given openings. We're not worried about how we're going to get around them. We're not worried about how we're going to get on and off the farm. All we're worried about is planting food, so we have this big beautiful food plot, so we can get big beautiful buck pictures on big beautiful food plots, right? Little do most folks know, and it's a common mistake, because why can I tell you that I can relate to this, and I can tell you that the biggest failure, especially in a high pressured state, is the food plot, is because I've been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, guys. Years ago, I started planting food plots I'd have to look back, and I know I've talked about this before on the channel, but I think it was like 96 or something like that. Planted the food plot on my parents' farm, 12 acres, had 2-acre open field, and I wanted kind of a shot plot, so I kind of had that mindset. And I went in and rode spruce trees that my father had planted before that, years before that. They were about 20 foot tall, and there's a big beech nut tree Anybody that tuned in that has experienced that farm with me, that old beech nut tree, you know, there was not a stand in it. It was a ladder up to it, had a little bench in it on the limbs, and killed multiple deer out of that stand. It was good to me over the years until I put that food plot in. That food plot went in. It was about shy of 2/10. Angled it up to the tree, carved a hole in it so they could come out, you know, into the shot plot, go out into the field, which wasn't planted. Now looking back at it, boy, I would like to have that back right. Moral of the story is this: I planted it, and the chain of pressure, because I was hunting it, went through the roof. That farm, I can honestly tell you, looking back at that, soon after that, I, you know, kind of went on to my portion of life, had my own farms, and kind of didn't hunt that farm as much, you know, when my parents had it, and then the farm got sold. Boy, I'm here to tell you guys that that farm changed my mindset dating back that long ago about not hunting and not overpressuring your food sources, because it changed that farm that quick. So on those comments on that last video, like I said, proves this point. So moving forward, how do we take that mindset of everything that my property has to offer revolves around the food plot? That food plot, guys, is a portion. It's a large portion of the success of the property. You've heard me say this before, and I'll probably say it 100 more times on the channel here, maybe 1,000 more times, that I would never own a property, no matter where I was at in the country, that I didn't think that I could, even with a bunch of excavation work, that I didn't think that I could potentially plant food plots on. Larger the acreage, total acreage, you know, more or the more volume of food plots that I would like to have, right? But I would own that property and not plant food plots if I knew that that food plot was going to do more harm than it was good. So a lot of you are tuning into this asking, how in the world does a food plot do more harm than it does good? Because we're attracting deer. Well, if you're watching this and you are this is kind of resonating with you, and you are one of the folks in any state, but especially a high pressure state, tuning into this, and you have planted a food plot and you have good summer movement on and off that food plot, but your shooting house or your tree stand is on that food plot, and from here on, all of a sudden, your numbers start decreasing. That's a huge step of this puzzle, guys. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to look back. It's a very chest pump. This whole industry it's male dominated, right? Let's just be honest with each other. We're all built the same way, right? It's a very dominant, I planted a food plot, I'm going to hunt over it, you're not going to tell me any different. Well, you need to be honest with yourself, because I'm here to help you experience what most folks never get to experience. Most folks never get to experience the potential of their farm because, like I said, sitting on that food plot, and all of a sudden the numbers right now going through the rest of the fall all of a sudden start diminishing. So here's one of the comments that I get often. I don't overpressure my food plots. Yes, I have a tree stand on them. Yes, I have a blind, but I don't overpressure my food plots. You know, I only travel to the farm once a month, and my food plots, I'm not successful hunting over my food plots. Why is that? Here is the truth, guys. Everyone watching this video, everyone tuning into this, everyone hunting right now in the state of Kentucky, everyone is focused on food plots. And you can be the less pressured food plot in a 20-mile radius, and your food plots are still going to be pressured. And how is that? Because everyone else in the neighborhood is doing it. So to change that real quick, to experience what your potential of your farm has to offer, is not be that hunter. Don't be that guy or that gal that is sitting on top of that food plot and adding to that pressure. So is there a time to hunt a food plot? That's one of the last things we're going to touch on here, guys. Is there a time to hunt a food plot? There is. There are very successful times of the year to hunt a food plot. When do you hunt a food plot? You never hunt a destination food plot unless it's with a gun from a distance. All 3 of my box blinds on this farm that I have right now, guys, all 3, I can reach out and touch and service, what I call service, a food plot with a gun. All 3 of those can be bow hunted out of. 2 of those, I should say. The one is way off in the distance. You wouldn't bow hunt out of that one. 2 of them, you can bow hunt out of them, and you could probably be very successful. Maybe easier with a crossbow out of the windows, right? But you could bow hunt out of them because they're at the end of the food plot, and they are, one is kind of on the shot plot corner, if you will, and you can get out. It all has to relate to, can I get in, can I get out? Most food plot hunting, you can get in. All food plot hunting, 95% of them, guys, you can't get out. So when is the best time to hunt the food plots? One is the best time to hunt a food plot is make sure it's not a destination food plot, but it is a shot plot, right? It's a hunting plot, something that you can hunt over and you can get out of Dodge. We went over the setup that I've got right now that I'm letting cook for our buck we call Atlas here, right? And that is a shot plot on the end of a, I wish it was a little more screened. My screening failed around some of it. It does have some, but next year it's going to be even better. It's got a shot plot aspect to it where the deer come through it, take a bite, they eat, and they move on out into the food plot. Dark comes, you can get down and you can get out of Dodge, and that food plot can have deer in it, and you can walk away from that and know that you didn't spook deer. I'm not saying wait till dark and leave the food plot and don't think you blew deer off from it, guys, because what happens is just about the time that you're leaving a food plot is about the time that most deer, including mature bucks, are getting to it. So you are always running into or making noise leaving, and what happens is that sets that pressure. You might not blow deer off the food plot, but that mindset of noise being related to that food plot, whether there's, you know, scent across it or whatever, you are not going to beat that. So one of the last topics that we'll touch on is this. It's so easy to get wrapped up in the world of food plotting that we forget about all the other amenities that the property has to offer. I hope to teach you that all properties across the nation have the potential to be way more than what you're building your whole farm around your food plot from. There's so much more that is involved. The food plot is a fraction, very important fraction, but if you are food plot hunting, you're sitting on the food plot, guys, remember this. You are sitting at the end of the rainbow hoping for that pot of gold or that, you know, that magical lightning strike to hit. It can happen, it does happen, but it's not the norm. Unless you're in the state of Iowa, Kansas, where, you know, maybe just 100 numbers aren't there, total numbers aren't there, and you could get away with it, guys. But even in those states, I don't design my properties in those 2 states any different than I design my properties in the state of Michigan or Wisconsin, New York, anything like that, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, anywhere that has pressure. I do not do that because it's a like I always say, it's a chain of pressure that you're not going to catch. You're not going to stop that. I highly recommend that you take this one to heart. I highly recommend that you don't take this personal. That nothing that I put on this channel, guys, is directed initially towards anyone or a personal jab. It's a jab to all of us to really make you guys understand the power of some of these amenities that we're doing, or some of these mistakes that we're doing that can be very easily changed. Here is probably the pinnacle of this video. In my habitat plans, I give the phases that I recommend for folks to do. It would shock you how many times that the food plotting is like way down the chain right after, and building everything else. And the first thing that folks do is build the food plot. The first thing right off the bat, build the food plot. And what happens is there's no correct habitat adjoining to that. We're walking through those locations to hunt because all the other stand assemblages aren't together. Maybe you hung a tree stand where I recommended that we did, and we ribboned it off and we talked through that location together. Maybe you hung a stand there, but nothing is created around it. Nothing is making that even better. And folks get frustrated. Well, that spot's not going to work. I'm going to the food plot. It happens time and time and time again. You have to acknowledge that the success of that farm is not 360 degrees, 365 days mentality wrapped around that food plot. There's so much more that comes to that. And I think slowly but surely, kudos to the gentleman in Wisconsin that reached out and said that couple of those topics that you hit, that everything has to work together, the property has to be connected. Kudos to you guys that have grasped onto that, because there's another gentleman not too far from me in Wisconsin that we always relate to. You know, designed the property in June of 2021, built 20% of it, and you know, killed 2 of the biggest deer they've ever killed off from it with only 20% of the property built. Why? Because it wasn't all focused on the food plot. The habitat was built adjacent to the food plot. The stand assemblages met the food plot, met the movement to the food plot, and he wasn't hunting the food sources. Bam, in business, and he's off and running. And I guarantee you this year is going to be another successful hunt on 40 acres, guys. It doesn't take a lot of property. So I would rather have you not plant a food plot than plant a food plot and treat it incorrectly and destroy the potential of your property. Thanks, guys.